So let's get some playing in. This may go very quickly, and that's kind of a problem on its own because I don't have something queued up. I was planning on doing something big after this. In fact, possibly instead of this, but Salerno ended up ending halfway through before I got a chance to read something. So now I'm kind of at the I don't know what I'm going to do. Okay. And this may go very fast. Let's find our sequence of play. If it's in here. Well, I don't think it is. Okay. Let's find it here. So, deployment, there isn't any in the first turn. So we go to the game rounds, and that's going to follow this order. Germans get to go first, do the Schlieffen plan. And my initial setup, that was the historical setup. Again, part of that's to test out the system and see how believable it turns out. Honestly, the historicity of the game, if you're allowed to not use the Schlieffen plan, it would be very hard for the Germans to have reworked their war plans. La Grande Guerre allows for it, with certain very limited exceptions, but you don't have this sort of general, freedom to do what you want. But here, we're going to go with that limitation. We're going to attack up here because, hey, that's what was historically done. So we're not going to reveal our dummy, although by not revealing it, we kind of reveal it. But we don't lose it. And the Allies have two dummies. Oh, look, the BEF is going to get just crushed. I'll put these aside so that we can find them. I'm going to put the German chits here. There are no chits at the beginning of the game, so I wish the dice were different colored. They kind of are. I could use the brown. This one has a little bit more of a brownish tint so that I can roll them together. All right, so we're looking at a +2 to the die roll, basically. Plus one more for an additional army that's been revealed. So that gets us to +3 to the die roll. German, Allied, we had a tie. Both are destroyed. Oh, that may not have been a wise idea. Okay, this is a problem. Now it's the Western Allies' turn, and now I've got kind of a problem. This is open. That's just going to collapse if I'm not careful. However, this might be close to open. I've got the real BEF here. Oh, these are Belgians. Ah, boy. I simply don't have the troops to defend. Now, there does not appear to be a plan 17 requirement in this game. So for the Allies, I am going to withdraw units up to there, doing the move action. That puts me to the Russians. I don't know what my numbers are like in these fronts. However, I do know that I want to take the offensive with the Russians. I'm going to do the Tannenberg offensive here. We're not going to expose our dummies. We do want to expose the additional units because they give me more options. And the Germans are exposed. And we're at 1 to 3 is -2. But we have a bonus, so that gets us down to -1. Here comes the Russian attack. They get a 0. The Germans get an S. Which is also a 0. We both lose an army, and the Germans are getting this anti-Austria chit, which they must play on the first Austrian battle. We take a loss each here. I'm just going to pile these up here for now. That is not a success, so it doesn't gain any ground. And now we go to the Austrians, and we're kind of like, oh shit, we got to use our jet. Let's use it down in a Belgian attack. I don't know what this is going to do. I think it's just going to create a -1 to my die roll. So got a lot of dummies here. Okay, everything's revealed. So we're looking at 2 to 2. Make it 3 because they have an extra unit, the Montenegrins. So we're at -1, and we have to play this. That makes it -2. And the Austrians get a 1. The Serbs get a 2. So an Austrian army is defeated. I do not believe... These damn dummies are the same on both. They look the same on both sides, so it's very confusing to me. I do not believe that the Serbs gain ground off of an Austrian attack, but I gotta check. It doesn't seem to support that. Now we slip up here. Now, if we can gain enough here, we could win the war with the Schlieffen plan. Hey, imagine that. We're gonna do that. We're gonna do an attack here. We reveal an army. And we capture something. And we're capturing Antwerp, which I have to hunt down. I will be looking for a German. Okay. What do these numbers mean? What do these numbers mean? The front that they're on. Okay, good enough. And that was the German action, another attack. Ally, we have got to prevent that from falling. That's why we threw units in place. I'm going to keep some forces here, and I'm going to throw these up into there. The Russians. The Russians were also successful. Ooh, the Germans didn't ship troops over there. They really needed to. That means the Germans could be in a lot of trouble very quickly. Okay, so the Russians reveal one of their armies, and they are going to grab Königsberg in region 7. There it is. And this is actually a real problem, because we're up on the base there. The Allies have lost a point. The Russians have gained a point. The Germans have gained and lost a point. So they're still there. This could be over real fast. What about our Austrians? We got problems. What we'd like to do is win a front. You can't completely win a front in this game, though. The replacements are going to come in. How did we feel about this? We felt like this was kind of shitty. Yeah, we don't want to fight there. We may be passing. All right, we'll hit the Russians. The Austrians historically attacked here. What the hell? Let's see what we get. That's 3. And there are more Russians than there are Austrians. So we're going to be attacking at -1. And we get a 1. And the Russians get a 4. They kill an Austrian unit. And that's not good for Austria. And now we're up to round 3. Well, I have got to do something. I can't just give this up. That's some of my production capability. I could do a strategic redeploy. From either of these these fronts. This one, too risky. I'd be giving things up. Let's get the German army here. And that puts it on the Western Allies. What do they do? Well, I have a fair idea that there's only one German army there and that I may outnumber it. But I saw a unit stripped out of there. I think I'm going to attack somewhere. So I'm going to do 1, 2, 3. And if I get... Yeah, let me get a real die. I don't want to try to figure out where 50% of the numbers aren't numbers. Okay, so we're going to actually attack up in Belgian territory. And the Germans are exposed. And now we're at +1. Ooh, shit. Did I get an S on a attack? I don't think so. I think I bumped that die. Okay. So now I'm at +1. I get an S. I'll be drawing a chit for that. And I'm at a 1. The Germans get a 4. So they kill the lead British unit. I gotta shuffle these suckers because I got a bad one. No, I got a good one. So I'm gonna have a Brits +2, and I've got to use that as soon as it's valid. Oh, and that was a British attack, so no ground is gained. We go to the Russians. We could get lucky, but we're down low in forces. On the other hand, we're pretty sure we're doing okay here, so we're going to do an attack against the Austrians. We got, oh no, not here. We're going to do it in Serbia. We reveal everything. And we're at +1. We get a 2. They get a 0. This is a German 0, I think. It's hard for me to tell the imagery. The Austrians were defeated. Let's see what we got here. And the Russians had a success. So we will be taking Sarajevo. And that is in 10. Which is here. Now, I don't know if we're allowed to gain this. I gotta look that sucker up. I believe the Russians can advance onto the Hungarian base. So that's something to worry about. Since that could cause a surrender and end the game, I need to do a repositioning. I'm going to take a chance because it's a lot further here. And that puts us on the 4th move, the Germans. Not allowed to attack the Russians. Don't really want to do more there. Do I want to try beating up on the Allies again? I have 2 armies here. I'm going to take a shot. This is still there. Okay. Although I actually have a pretty good chance there, and I know that I have a good chance there. I know that I'm at a plus. Yeah, I'll go there. Okay. So this is Brits. These are not Brits. Those are French. can't use that chit. The Germans use their chit, however, which goes back in the cup with no effect, and the Germans are at +1 on their attack. They get an S. All right, both armies are destroyed. And we get a replacement chip. What is this? This is a defense-only chit, I think. I'm not really sure. It's got a D on it. What the fuck? Can we tell something from here? 1914 Central Powers. This is maybe machine guns? Machine guns, it can be used by any country. What was the Central Powers 0? Courage is not enough. That could have been used by any. Okay. So this can be used by any, and I think it's just for the defender. Yeah. These chits are not easy to read. This may be necessary to understand them. All right, that puts it on the Brits. Now, I can't just move up and do something, or the Western Allies. I have 2 units here. I don't know what they have. I have only 1 unit here. I have only 1 unit here. Moving doesn't really help me too much at this point because I wouldn't gain anything, you know. I mean, I could reposition a force, but do I want to take a shot at Aachen? Why not? Let's take a shot at Aachen. Let's reveal this to get rid of it so that we have it available next time, because we're at the end and it's not serving any purpose. It's not confusing anyone. And likewise, the Germans. Okay, so we're at a net of -1. There are no Brits here. However, there is a machine gun, so we're at a net of -3. And this has to be played. I don't have an option to hold on to it. With -3, I'm at -1. The Germans are successful. That goes back in. One of these French armies is defeated. And now the Germans know that they're in pretty good shape here, but they're not going to get another chance to attack. I can kind of see why you want the shake-up. What about the Russians? We could take a shot at just knocking Germany out of the war here. How do we feel about that? Well, it doesn't look likely. We would have wanted to do it last time. We're going to keep picking on here and see if we can. If we knock Austria out, the game's over as well. See if we can knock the Austrians out. Okay, so we're at +1. Oh, that's a British chip. 3 to 4. The Russians, or in this case, it was a Serbian army that was leading, take a loss. And that's done. And that means the Austrians could regain this if they're lucky. That's about the best that they can do. We're going to go for the attack. We're at even. We get an S. They get a 2. We take a loss. And I think I've got these in the right place. We got an S, so we learned something. What did we learn? We learned machine guns again. That's made it through. So now, nobody accumulated any surrender points. There is no victory. Nobody has 6. I don't remember what it was. It was 6 fronts that they completely own or something like that. I gotta look at that. All victory cities in 6 or more fronts, yeah. That is not the case. The Russians control all victory in that. I would say they control in this. So that's actually 2 fronts that we've got them all in. But other than that, no. And like the Germans start out not having any in there, so that would have made it to 3 if they hadn't gained. So we did not get a victory automatically there. Replacements. These are going to go at the next turn at 1 army per replacement center held. Okay. Well, I've got the list of how many replacement centers there are. The Germans, 1, 2, or 4. I think the Russians are the ones who are at 5. Everybody else is at 4. So, the entire Austrian army is replaced. The entire Russian army is replaced. All these dummies are replaced. The entire British army or Western Allied army is replaced. And the entire German army is replaced. I'll tell you one thing. This has just solved, I think, the problem with not being able to continually push the number of troops to the front that some of the other designs have. This may be a little extreme in terms of how much production it's getting, but games like La Grande Guerre and Balance of Power have a tendency of, if you go apeshit on your attacks, the fronts end up being wiped out. Well, in this game, you're gonna get a reasonable number of armies back. Maybe not enough. Maybe not enough. We'll see. We'll see if my my tendency. I mean, this is the first turn of the game. Let's see if my tendency to be very, very attack heavy causes that to be a problem. All right, we're gonna pause for a bit. So as we saw from last turn, we're getting everything back this turn, and some reinforcements as well. And we can pretty much drop these anywhere we're allowed to be. I did check because it seemed a little weird that you would get replacements, but it just says on the next game turn, I think you do get replacements on the 1914 turn 2. I'm not sure that's reasonable, but the armies would be way too weak and small with the amount of violence that I accomplished against them. So I'm going to treat them. This is another German. This is another Russian. As if it's any other turn. Now, going in reverse order, and that would probably be what you'd choose if you won the die rolls, whatever, is the Germans would always, I don't know if you'd want to move first necessarily. You may want to cause the enemy to go first, but you'd certainly always want to go last in terms of placement, based on your ordering. So yeah, with this influx of new units, the capability to drop them pretty much wherever you like, but remember the garrison rules. I gotta make sure I got at least 1 unit in each front that I'm allowed to operate in. And that's kind of a big deal. Well, not allowed to operate in. That. What about front 11 here? I think that. Yeah, I think that front. Let me see if there's a requirement on that. Minimum garrison, Eastern Allied, no, German Allied faction does not have to be in front 11. And there's no real reason for me to, because I can't make this connection. Okay, and all the forces are deployed. I'm not going to go into where I put things because some of it is kind of the hidden fashion of it is part of what makes it interesting. So, Germans are up first. I have made the decision to push against the Russians. Schlieffen Plan canceled. We're going to go for the East Front. I want to try to clear this, but maybe I want to let the Russians lose a unit first. So I'm going to launch my attack here. And I found a Russian weakness. I have a backup unit, but I put a real unit in. So I'm at +2, +3. These are only on defense, so I can't use them. These are only British attacking, so I'm at +3. I get an S. That gives me a total of 3, which isn't too bad. They get an S. The Russians are defeated. We get loads. That's in area 9. Gotta find it. Jeez. I'm not seeing it. Oh, there it is. It's in area 8. Ah, clicked to the wrong side. That gives Germany a victory point. And what else? We each get chits. Now there are no new chits in the pool. Most on the years new chits come in. It's going to be a French defensive. And anyone, I think this is attack or defense actually. The courage one. Not applicable. Yeah, you can use it in any. Okay. That has created a hole that the Russians have to do something about, or else they will risk surrender. Not immediately, but they'll start losing their productive capabilities. So they really do have to defend that better than they have. And that causes issues. Over to the Allies. Now, where did the Allies want to launch their attack? They had to pick before the Germans did. I don't feel terribly comfortable here. I certainly don't feel comfortable here. So my strongest force is actually up here. Do I want to expose that? It's not bad. It is fairly strong. So I'm going to expose this and see what I'm facing against on the Germans. And I should be at +1. But I've got Brits leading the attack. So that brings it to +3. And the Germans will play their defensive as well. These are actually hidden when they're played. So we're down to +1 for the Allies. They get a 3 to a 4. The Allies lose the British Army, and that has just made them a whole lot weaker up here and may give the Germans a reason to go there. Russians, I gotta figure out where I can shift troops from. Pulled them out of the Austrian front, which I was planning on attacking in. I don't think that's gonna be possible now. And for the Austrians, well, a whole bunch just left here. And I've got a fair-sized army. Maybe I want to advance there instead of down here. It's kind of what I was planning on. Remember, I had to garrison Italy. I'm going to do an odd even on this. Alright, we're going to do it down against the Serbs. not reveal that. Not that it matters too much, but losing your dummies means you can't kind of bluff around by moving pieces as easily. And so we've got 4 units. That's 3 additional. That gives us a +1. We're allowed to play this for anyone, we will. That's only French. Did we want to throw that 0 in there? I don't know. Maybe we would rather hold it. But no, we're not allowed to. We have to play a chit if we have one that we can play. So we're at 3. To an S. S means the Allies get one of these. They get their own courage. Serbs are defeated. This goes away. And that is a victory point switch. And now we're back up to round 2 of this turn. Well, the Germans aren't really sure. They know they've got an advantage here now and could gain some ground, or they could continue pressing against the Russians. I'm going to do an odd even on that. We're going to keep going against the Russians. We will continue here because we'll be stripping away a victory point city. I really am afraid of this, though. Okay, so we've got that 3 again there, and we're facing a larger Russian force, which means we're only at +1. Must play the chit. A 3 to a 2, we defeat the Russians. No big shock. And now we get Warsaw, which is in, I think, region 8. Yeah. And that counts not only as a victory point, but as a production point. So the replacements are going to go down. Brits, a little worried here. We have to provide some cover, though, by attacking the Germans, I think. So we will do it up here at Aachen. Shit. I'm clumsy. I am going to reveal all 3 of my French units. The Germans are all revealed. We are, with 3 units, we'd be at even, and now we're at +2. We get an S, which isn't good. Germans get a 3, so the French are defeated. This chit is in there. And it looks like we got some machine guns of our own, I think. Because it's the Russians. And these should not be revealed. The Russians are in a tough position. Can they afford an attack? How much do I have up here? I only have 2 units that I'd be able to reveal. I don't like that. I don't like this. I'm not thrilled with this. I don't want to bust my Russians any further than they are. At this stage, maybe later in the turn, I'm going to pass with them. I don't really want to shift forces. I took a loss there. Shit. Yeah. I don't really feel like I have a good option. I'll pass. That puts it on the Austrians. They will continue their attack here. And that's 4. I'm sorry, that's 1 to 1. Is it even? +1 for size, +1 for the defensive modifier. So we're at even. We get a big 4. Both sides get a 4. And nothing is gained there. And now we have Montenegro. And that might open up. We go back up here. Take a little break. Germans have a successful front. We didn't see anything happen, so we're going to keep pushing on it. And that puts us at +2 with no chits. We get a 5. We once again defeat the Russians. And now we get Brest-Litovsk. Again, that's off 8. That's another Russian victory point gone. And a German one up. Oh boy. Where did we fight with the Brits? I think we did this. We'll keep going. Not a good trade-off. We're at -1, but we feel like we have to fight because Russia's in trouble. But at what cost? Now, the Germans could open up an attack here. But the thing is, I've got Russia on the ropes, right? We don't want to give that up to the Russians. Well, yes, they are on the ropes. And I'm going to shift an army there. I don't think I'm going to do that. I think I'm actually going to shift 2 armies there. I'm actually leaving that empty, but Germany doesn't know that for sure. They might suspect it. To the Austrians, we're going to try to finish off Montenegro here. Why have we gained nothing? We should have gained something. I think we should have Belgrade. And that's in 10. I just have to find it. There it is. That's this. Okay. So now we're at +2, and there are no chits out. We get an S. They get a 2. Both sides defeated here. And we get a Central Powers chit, which we may hold on to this time. Oh no, we're not allowed to. Fuck. The Germans. So, lots of interesting things. We've been beating up the French. Maybe we can get something, but there's not much of value on this path. We saw the Russians pull units out of here, but this is really attractive. So I'm going to say 1 to 4. I keep fighting on that same front. I can just keep plowing Russian armies under. Nope. Jeez. I'm going to go after the Russians here then, because I know I have good armies, and I find that I'm facing nothing. We knew that. And the Russian victory point city goes away. Down to the Brits. I'm afraid to bleed myself against the Germans is the problem. I don't have to. I'm going to attack here. And I run into a big army. Germans have to play their chit to no effect. Allies are at -1 here. Both sides get an S. Another French army dies. And we got crap. Still haven't gotten our red pants yet. And the Germans have trenches, which are defensive bonus. Puts it down to the Ruskies. I certainly don't want to attack. I'm going to need to do this at some point. So I'll throw a troop in there. I don't have anything there. That's bad. I'm not allowed to get anything there. I can't get the Russians in there or anything, which puts it on the Austrians. They will again reveal that they have an army, and we will grab Monsitar. That gets us to the end of the sequence, and what that means is now we get our recuperation of troops. Now, the Russians are only going to get 4 units back because we lost one of our production cities. Else lost enough units to count for anything. Put this here just to remind me. And yeah, they got all their troops, or they will be getting all their troops back. I'm seeing some interesting choices going on here. You know, I mean, yeah, I can just beat up on the Russians, whatever. This is my standard strategy, basically, for World War I games. It seems to be working pretty well, although we're not seeing any immediate victory or anything like that. The surrender rules are such that it's kind of hard to generate those automatic victories. By keeping Russia on the rocks, I think we can win the game there. And that's going to force the attrition war here to try and cause some casualties to the Germans so that they have to expend forces on the West Front. Turn 3, I believe we're going to be getting the Italians in. That's going to start causing problems for the Austrians. They will be of less effect in terms of what they can do against the Russians. That's fine. The Russians are pretty heavily taxed. But the question is, can we cause a surrender here? You know, we can grab a surrender point here. Maybe we can get one here. And then we're starting to really put the Russians on the line. And of course, that might mean that we more or less force them to accept the Brest-Litovsk Treaty early in the game on turn 4 or whatever, and we can get the German armies all to the west, or we can just keep pushing the Russians and see what we get. I like what this is doing. You know, it's not a detailed examination of World War I, but it also doesn't feel like the abstractions are unbelievable. You know, what do I have here? I have garbage. Okay. And here I have a defensive trench line. Great. We're also going to be getting more tech chips, or whatever you want to call them, coming into play. Yeah, this is more interesting than I expected. Or, you know, it's weird because some people that I respect seem to say very poor things about it, but I think it's doing a nice little job for what it is. The biggest part of this game is the sort of hidden bidding that's going on, and it's done in this reverse order as you set up your pieces on the board. You're defining where you think the battles are going to happen. You got to make sure to put defensive things where, or pieces where you're afraid you're going to get attacked. And you got to kind of figure out where you're planning on making your attack. Last year, I was focusing on the Russians as much as possible, even though I was forced by the Schlieffen plan not to do that in the first turn. This turn, I'm continuing that. However, I bolstered German defenses over here. For the Allies, it's a little different, but there are some options here too. There was the possibility of throwing Germans into the Italian peninsula. The truth is, I actually threw, I think, a French army into Italy to give a little bit more oomph here if need be, because this is actually pretty easy to get to the base. I want to talk about terrain as well, because it wasn't clear to me what's going on with the terrain. So it's kind of hard to tell, because someplace like this, and this is actually where I think the game may not be as realistic as otherwise. Someplace like this, there's harsh terrain, especially going into Germany here. But honestly, even on the French side, it's hard to fight through there. And I don't think the game represents that very well. I feel like there should be intrinsic terrain bonuses attached to certain attacks. If you're making an attack out into Nancy or into Mulhausen, maybe there should be a penalty to the attacker. And that would be one major modification that I think the game needs to apply, because I'm looking at this situation and it's like, wow, you get a French surrender point in here, not too hard, and you get an operations place, not too hard. If the Germans concentrate down here, which might not be a bad choice at the beginning of the game, sort of the reverse Schlieffen, right? Except without Switzerland being invaded, you're still invading Belgium for some unknown reason. It actually looks pretty easy. This is not exactly where you want to launch the attack. Paris is nothing terribly special in the game. The German plan was to take Paris because that forced the surrender in the Franco-Prussian War, and then again later it essentially was the final aspect in World War II of the Blitz on France. Likewise, in the Alps, you know, sure, these units are all rated 1s, but you throw a German unit in there, it just cracks. It might just crack through the Alps fairly easily in a way that isn't represented by how the German armies or French armies were able to operate in the mountainous regions on the Franco-German border. So again, it seems unlikely. It seems like there should be some baked-in defensive bonuses in this game. Otherwise, I think it's actually doing a pretty damn good job. Yes, there is this sort of hidden deployment aspect, which may not be 100% accurate, but you know, with the use of the dummy counters and sizes of stacks, you get some idea. We got a lot of new units on the board. Things like the MEF are showing up in here. The Bulgarians are now in the game. Italy, of course, is in the game. So, you know, we're beginning to see how the world is changing as we go. But yeah, I'm comparing it to some of the much, much more detailed games, even up to La Grande Guerre. And other than that terrain issue, I kind of like what this is doing for such a light game. It certainly impresses me more than Paths of Glory does in terms of being able to play the historical, you know, being able to get believably historical results out of sort of an uninformed first play. Now, as you play better and better, that may diverge. For example, the ability to attack down here. As you get more used to what the game is, you might see the war developing in sectors that it did not historically develop in. And I think the main reason for that is terrain isn't adequately expressed. Another way that terrain could be expressed would be for capture points that don't have victory point values or something along those lines, which would also be an interesting opportunity. Not that victory points are all that important in the game. At the end of the game, they're important. But here's the thing. The vast expanses of Russia are reflected. The difficulty of conquering that is reflected. The difficulty of conquering some of these areas where there wasn't a lot of distance, but, you know, it would have been tough to fight your way through, is not expressed. I would prefer to see a defensive bonus on certain locations. And I think that's actually a little modification to this game that would probably make it an absolute masterpiece, in terms of lightweight representation of World War I without really diverting from history. In fact, doing probably a better job than maybe almost anything I've seen. I mean, I don't know, Lamps Going Out was pretty good. Obviously, the heavier and more complex a game gets, the more likely it's going to have problems as the interaction of the different subsystems don't work right. Something like Paths of Glory, you can get away with that. And the historical game of that, if you add the historical modifications to that are suggested, and you know what you're doing in terms of you understand all the cards and everything, maybe you can get a fairly historical game out of it. If you don't play with the historical modifications, the effort goes in the wrong direction. The game kind of flies off the rails. With this, I feel the same thing is going to happen because of the lack of terrain modifications. But that's a simple change. And I wouldn't be surprised if Ted actually designed it with the terrain in there, and Phalanx came back to him and said, this game's just a little too heavy. Let's take some things out. And that might have been one that went away. I don't know. But it seems odd to me that someone who loves World War I as much as Ted does, has studied it as much as he did, would allow a flaw like that to exist. Terribly. Okay, I think I'm actually, I don't know why I shut off there. I thought I was going to have to think or something. But this game doesn't really require a lot of thought. I've gotten the deployment following the garrison, and now it's time to follow the little sequence of play. And I've been doing this on video. Might as well keep going. I don't know. Maybe we should step back a little bit. I think you've seen enough of the mechanisms at play. Yes, there's a lot of excitement, and it's very easy to watch, I think, and to film at more detail. But I think I'd rather step back, enjoy the game myself a little bit more, and try to give you synopsises. So let's go that way from now on. One thing, though, in the deployments, not only did the French put a troop here, the Germans put one down here. I want to win down here. I want to get enough surrender points on Russia that the game might be over. And I'm going to do that by pushing here and here with the Germans and Austrians, respectively. So long as nobody foils my plans, which may well happen. What we've seen is, oh look, my front's collapsing. I had better get reinforcements there. There goes my offensive. What's kind of neat about this game is the way the victory conditions, there's a lot I like about this. The way the victory conditions work, they more or less generate the grand offensives organically. World War I, the SPI game, does the same thing. You got to win it somewhere, and and the attritional nature, the damage that you're doing, forces those offensives to stop. It forces you're able to use the attritional factor to reduce and weaken the other player to the point where he has to break his own intentions for the turn. He has to take one of his 4 little seasonal actions, maybe to shift a couple of units or something like that, using the strategic movement. There's not that much difference between the strategic and tactical. You usually don't want to shift a whole bunch of troops somewhere. Although if you blow open a front, you can move all but 1 unit from that front and then keep attacking on it. But unless you're going to use them defensively, you don't really need to do that. The one advantage, though, here is by putting a German unit here, the Austrians command that German unit. The Austrians are the ones who are going to be using their turns to win. The problem with it? Who's winning the game? You got to be 3 points ahead. The Germans are not 3 points ahead. The Austrians get the points that come from here, but there aren't a lot more victory points there. So Austria may refuse to attack here at some point so that they can gain victory points over here. all kinds of little subtleties in the 4-player game. The 2-player game still has much of the same historicity going on, but not the conflicts between the different players. I'm not sure which I'm playing, actually. I think I'm playing the 4-player game, but you can see that there's some variances in terms of, what you have to do. There's nothing like that is simulated in the 2-player game, except for the Brest-Litovsk Treaty. Partially through the turn, and I realized I missed something last game turn. The game might have been over. Oops. So, at the end of the last game turn, actually the game might have been over on the first turn as well. The Germans might have surrendered with Königsberg when that had fallen. Because at the end of that turn, they did not have anything but their base. And at the end of the last turn, the Allies did not have, or the Entente did not have anything but their base. I'm going to make 2 quick rolls. We probably will keep going either way. But so the Germans would not have lost. The Russians would not have lost. And the surrender points got reallocated. So at the end of the first turn, the Germans got theirs back. The Russians would have had a surrender point at the end of the turn for this. You basically can get 1 surrender point per front. It can happen during combat. If it doesn't happen during combat and the base is exposed, at the end of the turn, you still get that surrender point. So that is actually kind of important. But we didn't see the end, so we do get to keep going. My mistake for forgetting. And honestly, I wish that there was something, and I may use some counters for this to mark. I've already checked my surrender. I've already gotten my surrender point for that front. It probably isn't too hard. It doesn't seem like they accumulate very easily. It's not like I can keep bashing this front and getting a surrender point again and again and again. It's also not like you can win a front permanently. In some cases that may make sense. In others, maybe not so much. So for example, this front. That should be pretty much unable to just reproduce troops. Yes, the Brits could land more troops there, but that's the end of the line there. And honestly, this is pretty much the end of the line here if you think about the way the world passes. You could keep saying, yeah, it goes on till Brittany or whatever. But this is obviously closed off. Others that there's no room for additional, well, yeah, the Germans could still get forces up there. There's no question. This is probably the most iffy. If you conquer Greece, are the Allies going to make another invasion? That's a pretty iffy rule. But for an abstraction, I can live with it. You can say, they will defend here to such an extent. They will defend, I don't know what, Walcheren Island? I don't know. To such an extent that they will continue to be able to place there. So that's what we got. Let me give you the half-turn summary then, or half-phase summary. The Germans launched an attack here, taking away Minsk. The Western Allies launched their attack up here, taking this. Notably, they did not launch an attack that they have set up here. It's not a bad attack, but taking away one of these is useful. And now I've got a possibility of getting a German surrender point. Got a possibility this way, if I win here, of eventually getting an Austrian surrender point. Some terrain would make those choices more interesting too. Because if it's hard to take this space, I could just sit there. I wouldn't have to make that attack for the extra one. It would be very, very difficult for the enemy to recover that front and restore it into good shape. Might be a reason why that decision was not made. Because what it meant was, if you were victorious here, getting this one space in either direction, if it's seen as a defensible space, that might reverse, that might make it so that you're always going to collect a surrender point for that front. And eventually, you're probably going to win the game off of that. There would be ways to modify that, make the terrain penalty only go in one direction. Is that valid? Well, in a sense it is. I'm not sure about the attack on Trent, but certainly on Verona, the Italians would have an easy time making an attack into Verona. The Austrians would have a hard time making the attack from Trent to Verona. The attack on Trent from either direction is probably pretty hard, but you could make these defensive bonuses only for the original controller. And put those on some of the barriers. Where they would go, hard to tell, but certainly Sedan and Metz, Mulhausen and Nancy, those would make sense. Would one make sense here? Maybe, you know, because of the forests. Maybe make the Pripets of some value down here. And just think about it. Königsberg was one hell of a fortress. What do you do with that? I don't know. You know, I don't know. The rest of the actions, the Russians had already done this by the time I was talking. They had taken Lemberg, which is, of course, a production city. And here's what's kind of useful. The production cities are still circled on these counters. So you can look and say, oh, look, the Russians are down 2, the Austrians are down 1. I hadn't noticed that before. Now I'm seeing that. I was kind of worried. How would I notice? Well, it's still a little harder, but okay. By blowing this front open, the Austrians were poorly defending it. I forced the Austrians to throw more units into play there instead of making the attacks that they might have won it in some other front. And that pushes us up to the second round of this. I need to take a bit of a break. If you added that terrain modifier, I think you might find there might be some weird effects that come from it. For example, the Italians attacking. Well, you know, that +1 modifier, I don't have any decent armies. I don't have anything that adds to it. Obviously, if I have the right counter, maybe I can try it. Maybe it's worth the challenge. It's better than fighting along a long series of spaces. It's better than fighting Germans, right? In terms of trying to do a quick end. But I'm just worried that by putting those in there, you might see some fronts that historically saw action not see action because they're now too difficult to fight in. In particular, the place I'd be most worried is right here, is putting a modifier in there on either side, especially on the French, on Sedan or Verdun, although, you know, obviously Sedan and Verdun were both difficult to take, but still. There's a reason the borders are where they are, however. Not just historically. I don't mean in the game as compared to history. I mean historically why the borders are where they are. Those are defensible borders. There is a reason that, you know, countries choose to take a river line or something like that. To some extent, some of the national nationalities kind of formed behind the defenses of a border, but also when countries negotiated their peace, they would say, well, let me have this border. So almost every border would, or many of the borders would include some sort of defensive modifier along it. And that's kind of the worry. Maybe not so much up here. Throughout here, as I said, almost all of those do. Much of this would. Something to keep in mind. In here, because I just did one player, but the Germans chose to attack here rather than reinforce here. They think they've got a decent unit there that might be able to defend and prevent an early victory point here. If I can get my victory point here, I could shift troops over, but I ended up getting a bad roll, getting another counter, a counter that's interesting, and not getting my victory point on the Russians and still being exposed here. And this is one of the things, there's a lot of luck in this game, a lot of luck. There is, you know, would I gain this victory point? The odds were heavily in favor of me. I had a +2 to the die roll. Got a counter out of it, at least an interesting counter. And, you know, then there's also the surrender die rolls themselves. I feel like that's absolutely appropriate in World War I. The countries were teetering at several points in the course of the war. A surrender could have happened in many cases. The one thing that I don't like is the Brest-Litovsk Treaty, because essentially that is as much as could have possibly been expected on an East Front surrender. So I don't feel like a surrender should end the game in all cases. However, again, that's just a little twisty thing that I don't know how to resolve. It feels like there's a really good core here that needs a little bit more oomph to it. You know, not much, and a little bit better rolls. Here I've got a counter, I don't know what the hell. +2 with an A, a red A. I would say that's probably Austria, but I'm looking in here to see, and I don't think there's a disposition of what these counters, how to interpret them on here. AH is Austria-Hungary, but I don't see anything that really defines how to read the iconography on these suckers. But what I have is 1914, it's a Central Powers chit, and it's +2. There are only 2 such chits, machine guns and Falkenhayn. The only thing I can say about that A is it's probably an any for the country allowed to use it, or maybe it's attacker. Again, you know, it's red, so it's an attacker piece, so I don't know. But I'm having a lot of trouble discerning these. This chart kind of helps, but you know, it would be even more helpful if there was a simple means of determining. Here's the countries that can use it in one place, here's what they can do, and it was spelled out somewhere. So that I don't, if there is some kind of grammar to these counters, then it's not inherently obvious and to me, and maybe I will learn it as I keep playing, but so far it's kind of eluding me. I would have to study all the counters to come up with what it is. I should go over what's happened. So we talked about the Germans attacking here. The Western Allies made their attack and got their surrender point here. I had that chit by that point. It's an attacker-only chit as far as I can tell. Therefore, it would not have applied. And the Allies took this. I'm marking that they got their surrender point by putting an army in there. I don't know what I'd do if they get driven back after that. That's unlikely because the Germans can take their reinforcements there next turn. And that point's lost. They can't do anything about it. They've lost the battle for this turn on that front. Of course, they've lost no additional ground, and you never do. It's not like this is plowing into Germany and going to get to Berlin or anything. It's not like losing Berlin loses you the game. It puts you in a position for 1 point. Same with Paris. For the Russians, I had to cover this. I had to put more troops in there. And that means I'm draining troops from other fronts, and the attack may switch to a different front. How flexible were the grand offensives? They generally didn't do that. You saw that a little on the West Front where the French would instigate an offensive and then the Brits would start one or something like that. You generally didn't see something like, oh, we were attacking in this direction, now let's shift up there. I don't know how I feel about that. I don't think I mind it too much, even if it didn't historically happen very often. We have the German general Falkenhayn, somehow assigned here, because he's allowed to apply to any force. And this is kind of major. This is going to be a Russian surrender point, over here, that's available to be taken. Now, I am at +1, +2, +4. I don't think I can lose that. Sure the hell can't now. And so the MEF, would I have chosen this? Yes, there was still some chance of me winning. It wasn't until the counter was revealed that I knew I had no chance whatsoever. And that means the Austrians have taken the surrender point here. Now that's a big deal because I'm not going to be able to eliminate the forces that are there. Sometimes you have to make the attack. Here, I'd have to make the attack. That pile is so big. If I want that second surrender point, I've got to get it there. And I'm probably going to be focusing on trying to force Russia into a surrender at this point. Don't know what happens. What happens to the victory points once you're down to 0? I mean, it's very easy to get down to 0, right? The Russians are down at 0. They have not lost all their victory point cities. I don't think there's a provision for negative victory points, and I don't know if what that means is I create victory points in the game by doing this. If the Russians are leveled out at 0, can lose more things, the Germans get victory points off them, and then those victory points are sort of in the bank for the Germans, but not really hurting the Russian chances of victory, or if something else is in play. I don't think the game actually gives me anything to tell me either that or anything else. It's hard to find the specific rules in this kind of game. This kind of rule set. It's really hard to find things for me. Too many pictures, too many words, and not enough organization. Basically, the question is, are these just some kind of counter for what's on the board that gets reset? Or do they have their own existential value, where this 0 is indeed a bottom line? And I don't believe it's spelled out. I don't know even where to find it. I don't remember where the rules on gaining those victory points is. And because it's just sort of text and pictures, the numbering is here, but it doesn't really help me. So I'm going to look some more, but I don't have an answer, so I think it's kind of something you make up. I think they actually are intended to work, as I said, where you can create victory points in the game. It's not a zero-sum game. You can never go less than 0 victory points. When a city captures, it gets 1, and the losing faction decreases the amount of victory points by 1. I think it's actually pretty clear that it's meant to bottom out like that and generate new victory points for the players. Russia can come back without regaining everything and look more appealing as a play in terms of score. So you can only do so poorly. It's kind of a catch-up mechanism for the multiplayer game, at least. Obviously, probably doesn't make too much difference in the 2-player game. It has some effect because the Central Powers are gaining 1 victory point instead of 2 on their opponents for each city they take on Russia now. That may actually impact the multiplayer game. That may impact both games in some interesting fashions. I'm not quite sure what the overall effect would be. All right, we're ready to start another one with the Germans, and I feel like the Germans have to get more surrender points on Russia, increase the chance of winning the game right now, so it's got to be a fight there. If I can win that fight, I've got, a 1/3 chance of Russia surrendering right away. We're a hard decision point here for the Austrian turn. The Brits, allies, launched their attack up here. It was a failure. The Russians can't do anything about my situation. I've lost 2 surrender points already, but maybe I can do something valuable against the Austrians here. I launched an attack. It ended up being a bloody draw. And now we're on the Austrian side. And basically, I have a German army here that I can release to somewhere. I could send, and then I will get 1 more turn with that army. If I send it to Germany, the Germans can do something with it. What could they do of value? All kinds of things. So the question is where they want to get their atjay, their power for next turn. Do I want to try to fling the Brits back from here? That would be the easiest thing to do. And I think that's going to go. Other options, though, would be to lay the groundwork for a surrender point against the Western Allies against Italy by sending it over here and letting the Austrians do an attack. The Germans might be able to win this fight anyway. They have the edge over there. So yeah, I think that's what I'm going to do. I think I'm going to send that German army. Not the Bulgarians, can't do that. I think I'm going to send the German army over here. And that puts me in a really interesting position in terms of being able to win back, or being able to put myself in a position where I can get some surrender points on Italy, or the Western Allies in general, for next turn, if I can grab this on this upcoming turn, which means we're going to fight that battle. The Germans were successful, got Ypres. And now it comes to the Western Allies, and this is a hard call. I don't have anything that really is calling out. I'm too weak here to attack. I've already done all my fighting there. There's nothing I can do of value. These attacks are small. They might take out a German unit. I've only taken 2 Western Allied losses. Taking out a German unit might be of value in terms of getting those points back, and I can't tell. I think these are all Austrian, but I'm not sure. The dummy counters. I can tell the real counters apart somehow, but I'm having more trouble with the dummies, maybe because they are all Austrian, and there is no differentiation. I saw a German unit move here. It could be a dummy. I'm not going to be able to kill 2 units. Am I going to be able to inhibit anything? The Germans probably aren't going to lose another unit. So I think I will go after the Austrians with an attack over here. And we'll see what that comes out as. It's probably not too good. In fact, I'm at a penalty. Okay, and the turn ends with, let's see. The Allied attack, I think, was a draw. We each lost 1. The Russians did an attack here where we got Przemysl. That's not how it's pronounced. Jesus, I learned it. I can't remember how it's pronounced. Leave the Slavic pronunciations out of my hands. I've told my joke about Mr. Chish a few times on this one. And then the Austrian attack here was successful. We took Verona. I think I've got the victory points correct. If you screw them up, you screw them up, and it's screwed forever. Now, let's look at the surrender points. Are there any that we did not record proper, or that need to be recorded additionally? I don't think so. I think we've gained all the ones where we're adjacent, and I don't see anywhere where we're adjacent and there are no opposing troops. So this is what we have, and that means we see if the Germans surrender, which is only on a 1. Look, Germans are out. And if the Russians surrender, which is a 1 or a 2, and they do not, the game is over. It was, you let somebody get a surrender point on you, and you are potentially fucked. And that's just key to the game. There is a lot of luck in this game. But, had the Russians also surrendered, that would end up in a loss for everyone. And, you could kind of look at that as like a Marxist revolution happening in both Russia and Germany. Sure, the Western Allies probably kind of win the war, but the world situation might be such that it's just infectious at that point and covers all of Europe, and there will be peace for the rest of the time, because of course communists would never go to war. They didn't believe in it. That's what Lenin claimed, at least, and Marx as well. It didn't turn out that way. Not in the least. The common man was regularly conscripted for even aggressive actions. However, whatever. So here we go. We had a victory by the Alliance. What are the point differences? Well, I believe it's a 1-point difference between these to determine. So the Western Allies won the game and the peace. And that makes sense. The Russians are clearly teetering and on the ropes here. It makes absolute sense that the Western Allies would win this one. So yeah, there's a little look at this. And I'm not quite sure how I'm going to pack this up, but you get to see how it played at least. No matter what, in terms of the historicity of the game, there are some really interesting choices going on here. You know, this sort of how do I improve my chances of getting an instant kill type win? Where can I get my surrender points, etc.? How can I limit the opponent from getting surrender point chances on me? Can I make sure he doesn't? You know, well, maybe never, because even the combat is fairly volatile between the chits and the die rolls. You know, yes, you can make sure that one place can't be taken by throwing a whole bunch of troops into it, but you're probably exposing something that is almost as bad. So you've got a lot of these kind of calls. Do you want to take a 1 in 6 chance of losing the game outright, rather than putting yourself in a much, much worse position on the other 5 out of 6 chances, or maybe, you know, whatever. There wouldn't even be a die roll, but 5 out of 6 times you'd be in a better position by letting yourself be in a chance to lose the game outright. So some interesting kind of risk assessment, etc. choices to make in the game, and I'm finding that really very appealing, even with the sort of, I'm not so sure how historical it is. I also didn't see anything that I saw as historically unbelievable. I do see that the terrain situation could result in very ahistorical choices and combats that maybe shouldn't be as easy as they are. I'm not willing to make a commitment one way or another of, you need to do that terrain roll in there, because I'm not sure of what the implications of doing it are. I would certainly like to test this out with some modifications, but it plays pretty damn well without.